Decisive victory. Almost, maybe you need to go in post and put some sound effects behind that. Maybe some heroic music.
Yeah, sure.
And put some echo on my voice so it's like decisive victory.
Sure.
Because it sounds good.
Yeah.
It sounds good, right?
Yeah.
Decisive victory. Decisive victory is when in war or business or argument or life or a game, one team or one side or one party or one individual achieves clear and overwhelming victory. It leaves no doubt as to who the winner is. It can create a shift in the balance of power, right? So it sounds really good. And you'd think I'd be fired up just to tell everyone you need to go get your decisive victory. But I'm actually talking about this not to tell you to go and achieve a decisive victory. I'm actually going to tell you to be careful of going through life looking to score decisive victories because they can cause problems. There's some things to think. Let's say you're doing jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, in jiu-jitsu, there's such a thing as a decisive victory. It's called a submission, right? When you get to submission, it's a decisive victory.
Yeah.
Right? You won. You submitted the person. But if you're looking for that, too much can cause you to take risk that's unnecessary. Now, listen, I'm the guy. We're the guy. That's our thing. We come from the Dean List. Sure. Dean List are going for submissions. That's how we train all the time. But if you're in a life or death situation and you decide, I'm going to go for this submission here, you might be going for something and taking risk that you shouldn't be taking. Or if you're in a tournament, you might take a risk that you shouldn't be taking. So be careful on giving up position. Same thing in business. You might, we're going to crush our competitor. So you do some investing, some over-the-top investment, capital investment on something to try and shut them down. All of a sudden, you spent too much, you leveraged too much, you gave up your position. So going for a decisive victory can cause you to take too much risk. It can also escalate the conflict. Because as soon as you start getting hyper-aggressive, the other side's going to dig in. They're going to start answering back that aggression. Now, all of a sudden, what may not have been that big of a deal, that wouldn't have cost you a bunch of resources, all of a sudden now it's going to cost you a bunch of resources. Because the other side digs in when you get aggressive. I mean, even in a street fight, like you go to really hurt someone, they pull out a gun and shoot you. Like that's what happens. So you escalate things. You get in going for the decisive victory, you're hurting relationships. This is like in an argument type thing. Mm-hmm. When I get to prove Echo wrong. Cool. I've totally made Echo look stupid in that big meeting. Now Echo actually doesn't like me anymore. It's like that old topic of winning an argument with your spouse. Yeah. Right? Oh, it's great. You won the argument. Yeah. Good job. Yeah. Decisive victory. Actually made your wife feel a little bit dumb. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Good job. Yeah. Terrible. By the way, that happens with your kids too. By the way. Kids become resentful because you're actually bullying. Like if you're arguing with your kids about something and you score a decisive victory, you're actually bullying them. So don't do that. You're going to cause unnecessary casualties, right? What kind of damage are you doing when you're going for a decisive victory? It'd be beyond relationships, which we just talked about, but even in a business, like even if I get the decisive victory, but I've wasted all my money or I've burned out my team, like I'm going to cause some unnecessary casualties. What about my focus? Because guess what? When you start focusing on a decisive victory, well, this happens when this happens in MMA, going for the knockout. And you see someone, they're just trying to get the knockout, trying to get the knockout, trying to get the knockout, trying to get the knockout. They're swinging with all their might. They're telegraphing their moves. and they're not seeing that they're getting touched up then the judges are scoring those touch-ups, or that opponent's getting that easy takedown at the end of every round, and all of a sudden they win 30-27. They got a takedown in every round, showed the positional domination. There's only 30 seconds left, but that's how you win an MMA fight. Hit a takedown with 30 seconds left. Do okay on the stand-up, and then just take a guy down and control him for the last minute, 30 seconds, and you win. But what happens is when you have somebody that is trying for a decisive victory, it happens too with submissions. Oh, I'm trying to get that submission. I'm going to exert all my energy on this guillotine choke. And then Echo pops his head out. I'm gassed.
Yep, it's true.
Fake story, not true.
never. Hypothetical.
But you see what I'm saying. What's the trade-off? What's the that's something to think about when you're going for decisive victory. What is the trade-off? You know, I'm gonna get a 600-pound deadlift. Cool, decisive victory all over the deadlift. How's your 4-mile timed run? How many pull-ups are you doing? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you're there's gonna be a trade-off.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna put all your money into crushing that competitor in one line of business. Cool. What about your other lines of business? So what's the trade-off? You need to think about that. Is there another way to win that's win-win, actually? Which is weird. Isn't it weird to think of, hey, Echo and I are competitors, and I want to defeat him. I want a decisive victory. And instead I go, you know what? Is there a way that Echo's company and my company can actually work together and we can both win? And maybe I win a little bit less, but I can also help Echo win. And then all of a sudden we have a good relationship. Maybe in 2 years we merge our companies to become the dominant force. As opposed to me winning a decisive victory over you, you hobble away. You go and join another company. You give them your IP. They have the money to invest in it. They build it and they take me over. Right? I blew it. Isn't it kind of a good thing if I can look for a win-win? We're negotiating for something. You know what? How about I figure out how you can win too? And guess what? What's driving a lot of these decisive victories is our ego. The ego loves the decisive victory. The ego is the most decisive victory-seeking being on the planet. It wants to win, and then it wants to raise its arms and yell at the camera at close range like they do in UFC. Like, ah. That's what your ego wants to do.
Yeah.
The ego, I brought this up. I don't think you may not know this yet. I was on a debrief podcast. I don't know if it's come out yet. Debrief podcast. The ego is a short-term tactical thinker.
Yeah.
The ego is not a long-term strategic thinker. So let's think strategic. How can I win with minimal resources? How can I win with minimal effort? That's jiu-jitsu, by the way. Right? That's what jiu-jitsu is supposed to be. Efficiency. Judo, that's what judo is supposed to be. Efficiency. I'm not going to use a bunch of energy against you. You're protecting that arm. You're squeezing that arm. You're making sure you're not going to give me your arm. Cool, I just took your neck. How can I win? Again, something to pay attention to. How can I win with the least amount of negative impact? How can I look? Echo's got his company. I got my company. Sure, I want to destroy his company. Okay, but is that really beneficial? Or can I figure out a way to defeat his company, but still allow him to exist in a way that's positive for the whole market? Is there a way to win with minimum negative impact? Which comes around to like, is there a way to win with what's the minimum force required for victory? What's the minimum force required for victory? Can I utilize the minimum force instead of the maximum force? That's what decisive victory calls for. It calls for maximum force. What we want to do is figure out oftentimes. Now look, is there a time when you need a decisive victory? Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Yes, there is. You're about to get in a fight with 4 different people. You want a decisive victory over the biggest one of them. You want to knock him out cold. That's what you want to do. You got somebody that messes with your country. You want to decisively show the world that that was a big, big mistake. Somebody messes with your company or with the people at your company in some way. You want to protect those people. You go after them. Yes, you want a decisive victory. But most of the time, you should think if that's really what the best outcome will be. You should really think through if that's what the best outcome is going to be. Because generally speaking, the decisive, dominant, crushing victory is not as good, generally speaking, as a victory that was gained with minimum force. Generally speaking. Look, are there cases? Yes, there are. There certainly are. There's cases where you want everybody to know. But most of the time, majority of the time, I'll say, not most, but a majority of the time, think through what your options are for a minimum force victory. There you go.
Yeah, that long-term strategy thing is obviously, I very much value that, especially nowadays. So this happens in wrestling, MMA, fighting, all this stuff. Where let's say me and you we're fighting for the championship. Me and you, big fight, whatever. I lose to you, whatever decision, whatever. Now the short-term game is like, oh, let me go train harder to maybe beat him again, right? The long-term game is to invite you into my training camp. Now we can train together. And of course, we both get better, right? Yep. But now I become better. I can see like all your secrets, your methods, all this stuff that not only apply to me competing against you, but me competing to everyone else or with everyone else. So it's like one of those things where, you'd never think that. You'd never think, oh yeah, even if you beat somebody, you'd never think, oh yeah, like let's invite him into my gym. I mean, nowadays I guess
it does happen.
Common.
It definitely happens.
Yeah, it's actually pretty common in MMA. But the feeling, that short-term feeling, like, bro, I don't want this guy in my gym watching me train, knowing my secrets. Like that seems like one of those short-term ones that hits you right away.
Yep, that's like the old school jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Very good examples of old school jiu-jitsu.
Yes, sir.
You couldn't train at someone else's school.
Yeah.
It's a créance.
Yeah. I was actually talking to Miha today, and we were talking about, old school stories and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, I went to this other gym. It was interesting because they had this really rigid tradition, and you couldn't wear any of your stuff when you came in. They had all these rigid rules and stuff. And then he's like, but when I rolled with them, there were just gaping holes in their game, very noticeable gaping holes, just because they're so rigid in this kind of training.
Incestual thought patterns.
Yeah, they don't introduce like new stuff from outside or whatever. I guess a little bit of attention, but yeah, it's that long term thinking, bro. You'd be like, wait, what holes? Like, oh, I'm not rigid to nothing. I want all,
Yeah, and the relationship things of like, oh, we're gonna underbid this construction company, and so you underbid them, you win the job, decisive victory. Now you got an enemy. Now, like 2 months later, you're calling them to see if you could use their subcon or their freaking drywallers, and they're like, no, that ain't happening.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Let's think through things. Think long term.
Yeah.
Think strategic.
That argument one is a big one.
Oh,
like
yeah.
When you're getting into debates with your friends and you're just like shooting down their arguments, making them feel stupid, like all this stuff, and especially in front of people, which kind of adds to your fuel, you know, other people watching, and then, they feel dumb or insulted or whatever. Yeah. And but no one's trying to hang with you anymore.
You know what's funny is like people don't really argue with me very often.
Yeah.
But it's not because it's generally because I'm not saying like, well, here's what I think. Yeah. I'm not going at somebody. Yeah. So if I'm not going at you, I'm just kind of telling you like, oh, what about this perspective? And then when you counter with your perspective, instead of me saying, no, that's wrong, I go, oh yeah, that's a good point. There's no real argument to be had. Right. Like, is it not possible that there's multiple perspectives of the same item? Well, yes, it is. Yeah. I understand that. I understand that if, I understand that there's gi and no gi jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And there's good points for both of them.
Yeah.
Which one's better?
Yeah.
That depends on a lot of different things. I mean, there's certainly people that will argue which one is better
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
I won't.